Picture this, a morning by the lake. The air still smells of fish and wet rope from the boats that came in at dawn. A crowd is gathered on the shore the way crowds gather around a fire, pressing in, leaning forward, not wanting to miss a single word. And then, through that crowd, a man pushes his way to the front, not a beggar, not a leper, not one of the broken ones who usually come. A man in clean robes, a man with the long fringes of someone who reads the scriptures in front of his town every Sabbath. A man whose face the whole crowd knows because they have been looking up at him from the benches of the synagogue for years. And this man, in front of all of them, in front of the fishermen who bow to him on the road, in front of the women who lower their eyes when he passes, in front of the merchants who stand a little straighter when he walks by, this man falls. Not gracefully, not as a gesture. He falls the way a body falls when the bones have given up holding it, knees first into the dust, then his forehead pressed to the ground at the feet of a traveling rabbi from Nazareth. His shoulders are shaking. His hands are open in the dirt, and the crowd, which a moment ago was a wall of noise, has gone very quiet, because everyone there has just understood something at the same time. Whatever has happened in this man's house, it is worse than anything they have ever feared in their own. His name is Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, the most respected religious official in Capernaum, and he is on his face in the street because his little girl is dying, and he has run out of places to go. If you have ever loved someone you could not save, if you have ever held something breaking in your hands and known you could not fix it, if you have ever called out for help and felt the silence come back louder than your voice, this story is for you, not as a lesson, as a letter written for you personally 2,000 years ago, and just a long time arriving. There is a moment coming in this story that almost no one talks about. A moment where Jairus stands in the road and watches Jesus stop, watches him turn away from his emergency, watches him give his attention to someone else while, somewhere across town, on a small bed, a 12-year-old girl is taking the breaths that her father does not know are her last. And what Jesus says to Jairus in the seconds right after that, when the worst news a parent can hear has just arrived in the mouth of a servant, is the most demanding sentence he ever asked anyone to believe. To understand that moment, and why it reaches you tonight, wherever you are sitting, we have to start here, on the ground, in the dust, with a man who has never knelt in public for anything in his life, and is now kneeling for the only thing he has left. If quiet evenings with these stories are something you need right now, stay with us, subscribe. There will be more like this. So let us go back to the beginning of the morning, before the kneeling, before the crowd. Capernaum is a fishing town on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and at this hour it is already loud, the markets open, the nets being mended, the donkeys complaining in the narrow streets. In a house near the synagogue, a girl of 12 is in bed. Mark does not give us her name. He gives us her age, the age of a daughter who is almost a woman and still entirely a child. The age where a father still picks her up sometimes without thinking and starts to notice she is getting too heavy and pretends he has not noticed. She has been sick for a while. They have called for the people you call for, the healers in town, the neighbors who know which herbs, the mother of the woman down the road who is supposed to know about fevers. Nothing has worked. And this morning, when Jairus came in to see her, something in her face was different. Something had moved. The kind of change a parent sees before anyone else because they have watched that face since it was an hour old. And he knew the way you know. He turned, he walked out of the room, he walked out of the house, and he started running. Not toward the synagogue, not toward the elders, not toward the men who would have agreed with him about most things. He ran toward the lake, because that is where the rabbi was, the one his colleagues did not approve of, the one they had begun to whisper about in the back rooms, the one whose name, if Jairus said it out loud at the next council meeting, would cost him things he had spent his whole life building. He ran toward him anyway. And when he got to the shore, he did not wait to be introduced. He did not clear his throat. He did not begin with the careful religious language he had used his whole career. He fell. And that is where we found him. Forehead in the dust, shoulders shaking, a whole town watching the man they had bowed to come apart at the feet of a carpenter. Stay with that picture for a moment, because everything that happens next, the road, the interruption, the news no parent should ever hear, the two words Jesus speaks into the worst silence of this man's life. Everything begins here, with a father who has finally stopped pretending he can carry it. To understand why that fall in the dust was so loud, why the crowd went so quiet, why the whole town will be talking about this morning by sundown, you have to understand who this man was before he ran. In Capernaum, there was one building that mattered more than any other. Not the customs house, not the Roman barracks at the edge of town. The synagogue. And in that synagogue, the man who held everything together was called the Archi-Synagogos. Say it slowly. Archi-Synagogos. Mark uses that exact word for Jairus. It does not translate cleanly. We say ruler of the synagogue in English, and it sounds religious and a little distant. But in Capernaum, in that year, it meant something much warmer and much heavier than that. The Archi-Synagogos was the man who decided who would read the scroll on the Sabbath. He was the man who chose who would speak after the reading. He was the man families came to when a son needed to be blessed, when a marriage needed to be witnessed, when a grief needed someone with authority to stand at the door and say the right words over it. His house was usually near the synagogue itself, often paid for in part by the same community that filled the benches every week. His name was the first one mentioned in the prayers. His seat was the seat everyone looked at before they sat down themselves. If you wanted to know what the town believed about God, you looked at him. He was the answer in human form. And Jairus had spent, we do not know exactly how many years, but the text gives us hints. At least a decade, maybe two, becoming that answer. A man does not arrive at Archi-Synagogos young. You get there by being reliable, by being calm, by being the one who never raises his voice when others do. You get there by knowing the Torah so well that when an argument breaks out in the back of the room, you can settle it with one quiet sentence and a hand on someone's shoulder. You get there by standing straight, always standing straight, in front of the elders, in front of the Romans when they come asking questions, in front of your own wife on the worst night of your life, because someone has to. Now picture that man, that exact man with that exact reputation. Picture him hearing about the rabbi from Nazareth.
picture what was being said in the back rooms of his own synagogue, because there was talk. By this point in Mark's Gospel, there is already serious talk.
Jesus has healed a man with a withered hand in a synagogue on a Sabbath, and the Pharisees have already begun, Mark tells us plainly, to plot how they might destroy him. That word, destroy, is in chapter 3. We are now in chapter 5, 2 chapters later, which means by the morning Jairus runs to the lake, the official position among men like him is already forming. This rabbi is dangerous. This rabbi breaks rules. This rabbi will get us all in trouble with Rome and with Jerusalem. A responsible man, a man with a title, with a community, with a seat, does not associate with someone like that. Certainly does not invite him into his house. Certainly does not fall on his face at his feet in front of the entire town. Do you see what Jairus was spending? Before Jesus had said a single word back to him, before there was any promise, any healing, any sign that this trip would be worth anything at all, Jairus had already paid. He had paid his standing. He had paid his name. He had paid every careful conversation he would ever have again with the council, because by tomorrow morning every one of them would know. The archysynagogos kissed the dust at the feet of the Nazarene. There is something about love that does this. Love walks a man straight through the door of his own reputation and out the other side, and he does not even feel the wood splinter on the way through, because on the other side of that door is his child, and next to his child, nothing else weighs anything. If you have ever been the strong one for everyone, with no one to be weak with, if you have ever spent your whole life standing straight in front of others and not known where to put yourself when the floor gave way, sit with Jairus for a moment. He is you in a different robe. He is every parent, every elder sibling, every quiet shoulder that other people lean on, who one day discovers that the thing they cannot fix is inside their own house. And he is showing you something. He is showing you that there is a kind of trouble in which the title finally becomes too heavy to wear, and the only honest thing left is to put it down in the dust and go. Watch what he does not do, by the way. He does not send a servant. An archysynagogos could have sent a servant. That was the normal thing. You sent a trusted man with a message. You stayed home. You preserved the dignity of the office. Jairus does not. He goes himself. He runs himself. He falls himself. There is something in Mark's verbs here. Mark keeps using a word for falling that is the same word used elsewhere for worship, for the prostration a person makes before God. Mark is not being subtle. He is telling us, in the grammar itself, that this fall is not just a desperate gesture. It is the first true act of worship in this man's whole career. He has stood in the synagogue for years. He has read the Holy Scrolls. He has led the prayers. And the first time his body bends all the way to the ground in front of the living God, it is on a dirty street, in front of a crowd that until that morning had bowed to him. The God of his fathers had been waiting a long time for that bow, and it came not from the seat, not from the scroll, not from the prayer book, but from the broken place a father comes to when his daughter is dying and there is no one left to perform for. Hold him there for a second longer, because in the next breath the rabbi is going to do something. He is going to do something so simple that for 2,000 years readers have skipped past it without noticing what it cost and what it gave. He is going to stand up, and he is going to start walking. Now look at what Jesus does. Jairus has poured everything out on the ground: his title, his standing, his careful career, and he has gasped out the only sentence he came to say. Mark gives us the words exactly. "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be made well and live." That is it. That is the whole prayer. No theology, no flattery, no promises about what he will do if it works. A father's sentence, the shortest, truest kind. And Jesus, listen to this, Jesus does not answer him, not with words. Mark gives us no speech here, no teaching, no question to test his faith. No, "Do you believe I am able to do this?" the way Jesus sometimes asks. No examination, no pause, just one verb. He went with him. That is what Mark records. Kai apelthen met autou. He went with him. He went away with him. 3 small words in Greek dropped in like a stone into still water, and everything in the universe rearranges around them. Think about what that small verb is carrying. Jesus had just stepped off the boat. He had crossed the lake from a long, hard day on the other side, where he had cast out a legion of demons into a herd of pigs and watched a whole town beg him to leave. He has not eaten. He has not rested. The crowd on this shore has been waiting for him since dawn. Sick people, people with questions, mothers with feverish children pulled to the front, scribes ready to test him, fishermen wanting one more word. He had just begun to teach, and in the middle of that teaching, a man falls at his feet with a broken sentence about a dying girl. And Jesus stops mid-thought, mid-crowd, mid-life. And he goes. He does not say, "Let me finish what I was doing." He does not say, "Send someone ahead and I will come tomorrow." He does not interview Jairus about his theology or ask him why he never spoke up for him in the synagogue. He does not require Jairus to apologize for the backroom whispers of his colleagues. He simply rises and walks beside him. There is a sentence in the prophet Isaiah that says of God, "Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear." That is what is happening on this street. The Father is still on the ground. The dust is still on his beard, and the answer is already standing up, already moving toward the door of his house. Watch the road begin. The crowd, which a moment ago had pressed in tight around the rabbi, opens just enough for him to step through it. Jairus, on shaking legs, gets up off the ground. His robes are smeared with the street. His hands are still dirty. He has not had time to compose himself, to fix his hair, to remember what an archisynagogos is supposed to look like. He just walks. Half a step ahead, glancing back to make sure the rabbi is actually following, the way a man does when he cannot quite believe the help is real. And the rabbi is following. The disciples are coming. The crowd is coming. The whole noisy, dusty, sweating mass of Capernaum is now moving in the direction of one small house with one small bed inside it. The whole world bending for a few minutes toward a 12-year-old girl. Sit with that picture, because there is something there that I do not want you to miss. Jesus did not ask Jairus to be a better man before he came.
He did not say, "Wait here while I check your record." He did not test the man's faith with a riddle. He saw a father on the ground. He heard a sentence broken in half by tears, and he went. That is the verb. He went. If you have ever felt that God shows up for others but not for you, if you have ever wondered in some quiet hour whether your prayer was small enough or polished enough or worthy enough to be heard, let this verb sit on you tonight. The man who got the immediate yes was not someone with a perfect history with Jesus. He was a man whose colleagues were already plotting against the very rabbi he was begging. He was a man with a complicated record. He was a man who, until that morning, would never have stood that close to that teacher in public. And Jesus did not hold any of it against him. There was no audit. There was no waiting room. There was a fall, a sentence, and a yes that took the form of footsteps.
Mark, the most spare of all the gospel writers, Mark, who edits everything down to the bone, Mark chooses to keep this small verb. He could have summarized. He could have moved on. He keeps it because he wants you to see it. He went with him. The God of the universe, on a dusty Galilean street, falling in beside a broken father, matching his pace, walking him home. Now, and this is where the story turns. They are not going to make it home before something happens. There is another person in this crowd, someone we have not been watching, someone who has been ill not for a few days, but for 12 long years. And in a few steps, she is going to reach out her hand. And the road that has just begun, the road that Jairus thought would go straight from the shore to his daughter's bedside, that road is about to stop. Not slow. Stop. And Jairus, who has just been answered, is about to learn what it feels like when the yes from heaven runs into a body that is not his daughter's. He is about to stand in the road and watch. She has been in this crowd the whole time. We did not see her because nobody saw her. That is the point of her. For 12 years she has lived in a body that bleeds and does not stop. 12 years. Long enough that a girl born the year her sickness started would now be on a bed across town, dying. Mark holds those two 12s next to each other deliberately. One number for a daughter who has been loved her whole life. One number for a woman who has not been touched in all that time. By the law of her people, what is happening in her body makes her unclean, which means every chair she sits on becomes unclean. Every cup she drinks from, every person she brushes against in a market. For 12 years, she has been the one who steps back when others step forward, the one who pulls her veil tighter when a neighbor approaches, the one who has not been embraced by her own mother since she was a young woman. She has spent all her money on doctors, Mark tells us in one cruel, small sentence, and is no better, but rather worse. And she has heard about him. So today, when the rabbi came back across the lake, she did something she should not have done. She came out into the crowd. A ritually unclean woman in a press of bodies, brushing against every person she touched. If anyone had recognized her, they would have driven her out with shouting. But the crowd is thick enough that she can disappear inside it. And she has one thought. If I can just touch the edge of his cloak. Not his hand, not his face, not even his arm. The fringe, the tassel, the kraspedon, as the Greek calls it. the small knotted thread sewn to the corner of every faithful Jewish man's robe, the one that was supposed to remind you of the commandments of God. She is going to reach for the smallest, most outer edge of him, as if to say, I will not ask for much. I will not even ask to be seen. Just let me get close enough to take a thread. Now picture the road. They are walking. Jairus is half a step ahead. Behind them the crowd is pushing, bumping, breathing on their necks. And somewhere in the middle of that crush of bodies, a woman crouches a little, slips between two shoulders, stretches out a thin hand at the level of her own waist, and her fingers brush the swaying fringe of his robe. That is all. A fingertip on a thread. And the road stops. Jesus stops walking. The crowd, which was moving like a slow river, stalls and bunches. He turns. He looks around. He says, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples almost laugh at the question. "Look at this crowd," they say, "and you ask who touched you?" They mean it gently. They mean it as the obvious thing. Everyone is touching you. Half of Capernaum is pressed against you. But Jesus does not move. He is looking. His eyes are going slowly across the faces in the crowd. He is waiting. And we are not on Jesus right now. We are on Jairus. We are on the Father. Mark does not give us a single word from him in this whole long pause. Not a sentence. Not even a sigh. Mark is a writer who knows what silence does. He could have written, and Jairus said, "Please, my daughter is dying." He could have written, Jairus pulled at the rabbi's sleeve. He writes nothing. The silence around Jairus in these verses is so loud it has its own weight. Stand inside it for a moment. He is right there. He can see the door of his own street from here. The girl is in that house. Every second is a second she does not have. And the rabbi he just spent his reputation on, the rabbi who 3 minutes ago was walking with him, has turned aside for someone he cannot even see yet. Someone who reached out a finger in secret. Someone who has not yet had the courage to step forward. And the searching look on the rabbi's face says clearly, I am not moving until I find her. Have you ever been here? Not in this exact street, but in this exact place inside yourself. You called for help, and the help started. You felt it. You felt the answer rising. And then, somehow, something else stepped into the space. Someone else's emergency. Someone else's question. Someone else's miracle. And you stood there with the words still in your throat, watching the attention you needed go to a body that was not yours. If you have ever felt that God seemed to stop for everyone but you, if you have ever waited, with your own clock running out, for the one you called to turn back toward you, sit here in the road with Jairus. He is the patron saint of that exact silence. Notice what he does not do. He does not interrupt. He does not grab Jesus by the arm and say, "Please, there is no time." Mark does not even tell us he is breathing hard. He stands. He waits. And somewhere across town, a small body is getting smaller. A mother is holding a damp cloth to a forehead that is going cool under her hand. A servant is already looking at the mother's face and beginning, in his own heart, To form the sentence, he is going to have to walk out into the street and say, "None of this Jairus knows. He only knows the rabbi has stopped, and in the long, scraping seconds while Jesus keeps looking, the woman is also frozen. Mark tells us she is afraid and trembling. She knows what she did. She knows she was not supposed to be in this crowd at all, much less to touch a holy man's clothes. She is sure she is about to be exposed in front of the whole town. And she is right. She is about to be, but not in the way she fears. There is a long moment. The rabbi looking, the woman trembling, the crowd quiet, the father waiting. And the camera, if there were one, would hold on Jairus' face, a face we cannot read, a face Mark refuses to describe. Whatever is happening in him is happening behind the eyes, and Jesus is still not turning back toward home. The road has not just slowed, the road has stopped. And the worst news of this man's life is, at this exact moment, putting on its sandals across the town and starting to walk toward him. The woman comes forward. She kneels in the same dust Jairus knelt in not long ago. She tells the rabbi the whole truth. The 12 years, the doctors, the money, the silent reaching, the thread. Jesus listens to her like there is nothing else in the world. He calls her daughter. Daughter. The first word of kindness, perhaps, that anyone has called her in over a decade. He tells her her faith has made her well, and to go in peace. And while he is still speaking those last gentle words to her, while his hand is still in the air over her head in something like a blessing, Jairus sees them. 3 men, 4 maybe, coming down the street from the direction of his own house. He knows their faces. They are his servants, his household, the ones who were inside with the girl when he ran out. They are walking quickly but not running, and he understands, before they reach him, what that means. People run when there is still time. People walk like this when there is no longer any need to hurry. They reach the edge of the crowd, they push through, they find their master. And they will not look at him for very long when they speak. Mark gives us their sentence almost exactly the way they would have spoken it. Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? 2 sentences, the whole sky inside them. Your daughter is dead. The words a parent's mind refuses to assemble even after the syllables have already landed. The words that change which room of the house is the saddest room. The words that take all the running of the morning, the dust, the falling, the spent reputation, the trembling hope, and lay them down on the ground like something that no longer matters. And then the second sentence, which is in some ways even crueler. Why trouble the teacher any further? They mean it kindly. They are good men. They are trying to spare him further humiliation. They are saying, "Sir, it is over. Come home." There is nothing for the rabbi to do now. We were too late. Their kindness is the kindness of people who have already given up. They do not know yet who the rabbi is. They think he is a healer. Healers cannot do anything for the dead. So they want to fold the mourning closed and walk their master home so he can be with his wife and begin what people begin to do in a house where a child has just died. Now look at Jairus. Mark, who has refused him a single word for this whole interruption,
still does not give him one. Whatever happens on his face when those words land, Mark will not tell us. Maybe Jairus does not even know himself what is happening on his face. The body does strange things in that exact second. Some parents have told me their legs went numb. Some have told me they smiled ridiculously because their mouths did not know what to do.
Some heard the words from very far away, as if through water. Jairus is standing there, in the street, in the middle of a crowd, beside a woman who has just been healed, and he has just become a different man than the man who knelt at the lake. 2 minutes ago, he was a father with a dying daughter. Now he is a father with a dead one. And here is where Jesus does something so quiet it would be easy to miss. He overhears. Mark uses that exact verb. Jesus overhears what the servants say to Jairus. Not, they tell him. Not, Jairus turns and reports the news. Jesus, already turning back from the woman, catches the words in the air on their way to a father's heart. And before they can finish landing, before Jairus has even fully processed what has just been said to him, Jesus speaks. He speaks to Jairus, not to the servants. Mark records the Greek with terrible care. Me phobou, monon pistue. It is short. It is the shortest possible sentence he could have made. 4 words. And every word is doing work that English struggles to carry. Me phobou. Do not be afraid. But the tense is present continuous. He is not saying, do not start to be afraid. He is saying, keep on not being afraid. Stop the fear that has already begun right now in this second and keep stopping it. Monon pistue. Only believe. Again, present continuous. Keep believing. Keep on doing the thing you did at the lake when you fell on your face. Keep doing it. Right now, with this news in your ear, with your servants' faces in front of you, with the door of your house at the end of this street. Keep believing. Hear what he is not saying. He is not saying, it will be fine. He is not saying, there is still time. He is not explaining anything. He is not promising. He is making a request. The most demanding request, I think, that Jesus ever made of anyone in the Gospels. He is asking a man who has just been told his daughter is dead to keep believing. Present tense, this very second, that the rabbi who stopped for someone else is still the rabbi who came for him. He is asking Jairus to do something almost no human being can do without help, and to do it standing up, in a street, in front of the servants who already think the morning is over. Sit here for a second, because this is the heart of the whole story. This is the sentence the whole video has been walking toward. If you have ever loved someone you could not save, if you have ever waited for a word, a sign, a phone call, and gotten silence instead, if you have ever been handed the news that closes the door you were running toward, let these 4 small words sit in your chest. Do not be afraid. Only believe. Not as a slogan, as something a person says to you while he is looking at you with full attention, while he is still standing on the road with you, while he has not let go of your shoulder. And then, without waiting for an answer, because there is no answer this man can possibly give in this second, Jesus starts walking again, not back toward the lake, not in another direction, toward Jairus' house, toward the room where the girl is. The servants are still standing there with their kind, hopeless faces. The crowd is starting to whisper, and the rabbi has just decided, with his feet, that he is not finished. The road, which had stopped, is moving again, and Jairus, with the worst sentence of his life still ringing in his ears and the 4 quietest words he has ever heard still warm against his face, takes the first step behind him. He has no idea yet what is waiting in his own house. He only knows he is still walking, and he is not walking alone. You hear his house before you see it. That is how it worked in a town like Capernaum. When a child died, the news ran ahead of the family through the narrow streets, and by the time the father got home, the professional mourners were already there. They were already wailing. That high, broken ritual sound that women in that part of the world made over the body of a dead child. A sound that had a tune to it. A sound that belonged to no other moment in human life. There were flute players too, even for a small household, even for a girl of 12. The Mishnah, the old Jewish writings, says the very poorest funeral required at least 2 flutes and 1 wailing woman. For the daughter of the archisynagogos, there would have been many more. So as Jairus turns into his own street with Jesus at his shoulder and 3 disciples behind him, Peter, James, and John, the only ones the rabbi has allowed to come this far, the sound is already there. He hears it from half a street away, the flutes, the wailing. The neighbors gathered in the small open courtyard outside his door. The professional women already tearing at their hair the way the custom required. The whole soft, terrible machinery of death already running in his own house around his own daughter. Imagine walking up to that. Imagine your own door, your own threshold, and the sound of a funeral coming out of it for someone you kissed on the forehead at dawn. Mark gives us no description of Jairus' face here either. He has been merciless about that all the way through. But he gives us in one small phrase what Jesus does. Jesus enters in. He steps into the courtyard, and he looks around, and he says one sentence that, if you read it quickly, sounds almost careless. Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. Now feel that sentence land in that courtyard. These are not strangers. These are women who have been doing this work for years. They have washed bodies. They have wrapped them in linen. They have stood at countless gravesides. They know death. They have just been inside that room. They have seen the girl's face. They have closed her eyes themselves. They know what a dead body looks like better than almost anyone else in that town. And this rabbi, this dusty traveler from Nazareth, walks into their professional grief and tells them, "She is only sleeping." And they laugh. Mark uses a sharp little Greek word here, kateguelon. They laughed him down. They laughed at him. They mocked him. It is not gentle laughter. It is the laughter of people who feel they have just been insulted by someone who does not know what he is talking about. Sir, with respect, we have just laid her out. We know what we are looking at. Their laughter fills the courtyard. The flutes have stopped, maybe. The wailing has paused. And in that strange new silence, the silence of mockery,
Jairus stands beside the rabbi he just spent everything on, and he hears his own household laughing in the face of the only hope he has left. Stay there for a second, because this is one of the loneliest places in the whole story. Worse, maybe, than the road. On the road, he had only the silence to fight. Here, in his own courtyard, the people who work for him, the neighbors who respect him, the women who came in good faith to grieve his daughter, they are all, every one of them, certain that the rabbi is wrong, and they are saying it out loud. And the worst news of his life is being confirmed in his own street by laughter. If you have ever been the last one still believing in your own house, if you have ever held on to a hope that everyone around you, kindly or not, had already let go of, sit here with Jairus. He is the patron saint of that particular kind of loneliness too. The kind where you cannot tell whether you are the one fool in the room or the one sane person in a room of fools. The kind where holding on costs you not only your strength, but your dignity, because everyone can see you holding on to something they think is already gone.
Then look at what Jesus does. He does not argue with them. He does not defend himself. He does not explain. He does not try to convince the flute players that they have misjudged the moment. Mark uses a strong verb here. He put them all outside. Ekbalon. The same root used elsewhere for casting out, driving out. Not violently, but firmly, completely. He clears the courtyard. He clears the house. The wailing women, the flute players, the neighbors who came to do the right thing, the servants who came with the bad news from the lake, all of them outside. The laughter is put on the other side of the door. The professional grief is put on the other side of the door. And inside, only 5 people remain. The mother, the father, Peter, James, John, and Jesus. Mark counts them for us very quietly. 5 witnesses and the rabbi. The smallest room in the story, the smallest gathering. The professional noise of death cleared out, the well-meaning crowd cleared out, the laughter cleared out, and only the people who are willing to be in the room without knowing what is about to happen, only they get to stay. There is a small lesson hidden in this, the kind a friend might whisper sideways. Some moments God does in front of crowds, the stilling of a sea, the feeding of 5,000. But some moments, the most tender ones, He clears the room first. He does not perform them for skeptics. He does not stage them for flutes. He does them in small rooms with the door closed, with a handful of people who came not to mock and not to grieve professionally, but simply to stand in the room and see whatever He is about to do. And then Jesus walks down the short hallway, toward the back of the house, toward the room where she is. Jairus and his wife behind him, the 3 fishermen quiet at the door. And in that little room, on a small bed, a 12-year-old girl lies under a cloth that someone, her mother probably, has just smoothed over her face. The room smells of the herbs they have been burning. The light through the small window is the same light that was on her face when she was born. Jesus stands beside the bed. He looks down at her, and he reaches out his hand. His hand goes down to hers. That is the first thing. Not a word, not a prayer raised over the bed, not an incantation. He bends a little at the waist, the way an adult bends to a child who is sleeping, and he takes her hand in his. Think about what that hand has just been doing. A few minutes ago it was held up over a trembling woman in the street in something like a blessing. A few hours before that it was on an oar, pulling across the lake in the dark. A few weeks before that it was on a hammer, in a workshop in Nazareth, the way it had been for 30 years. This is a carpenter's hand, calloused, warm, and it closes around the small, cool hand of a 12-year-old girl whose mother has already washed her for burial. And then he speaks. And here Mark does something he almost never does. He stops translating. All through his gospel, Mark has been turning the words of Jesus into Greek for his Roman readers, faithfully, carefully. But here, in this small room, with this small hand in his, Mark refuses. He keeps the original sounds. He writes them down the way they were spoken, in the language a girl in Capernaum would have grown up hearing. Talitha kumi. 2 words, Aramaic. The everyday speech of Galilean homes, not the Hebrew of the synagogue, not the Greek of the marketplace. The language a mother used when she leaned over the bed in the morning and said, "Wake up, sweet one." Mark gives us a translation right after in case we missed it, but the way he gives it is itself tender. "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Except the word he uses for little girl is closer to little lamb, little one, the small endearment a parent reaches for when there is no one else in the room. Talitha is not a clinical word. It is what you call your child when you have just brushed your hair. Kumi is not a command shouted at death. It is the simple word for get up, the one used 1,000 times a day in 1,000 houses, when it was time to get out of bed, when breakfast was ready, when the sun had risen and the small body under the blanket needed to start the day. That is what he says to her. He does not stand over her body and address death. He does not speak to a corpse. He bends down, takes her hand, and speaks to her the way her father would have spoken to her on any morning of her life, as if she had simply overslept, as if the only thing that had happened in this room was that a little girl had not yet woken up, and someone who loved her very much had come in to say it was time. And she opens her eyes. Mark, who has been so careful with his small verbs all the way through, gives us another one here. Immediately the girl arose and walked. She got up. She stood up. And then, before anyone could fall on the floor, or shout, or weep, she did something so ordinary that it changes the whole texture of the moment. She walked. Around the room, maybe. To her mother, probably. Her bare feet on the floor that she had walked on since she was small. The cloth that had been over her face now slipping to the bed behind her. 12 years old, Mark tells us. And he tells us her age in this exact place, not earlier, because he wants you to see her at her full height now, alive again, standing up on her own 2 feet in the room where she had been laid out. And the parents, Mark, who has refused Jairus a single word for so long, finally gives him a feeling. He says they were overcome with great amazement. Existasis, a Greek word that means, literally, to be moved out of yourself, to stand outside of where you were a minute ago. The kind of astonishment that is so large it does not have room inside one body. Jairus is standing in the room where, 10 minutes ago, his world had ended. His wife is standing beside him. Their daughter, on her own legs, is in the room with them. And whatever a man feels in that exact second, Mark cannot put in words, and does not try. He just tells us they were outside themselves. And then comes the detail that I love most in this whole story. The detail that, if I am honest with you, is part of why I trust the Gospels at all. Jesus turns to the parents and tells them two things. First, tell no one about this, which is his usual quiet way. He does not want a crowd around the house. He does not want this girl turned into a sign. He wants her to have her life back, not a circus. And second, give her something to eat. Give her something to eat. Sit with that sentence for a moment. The Son of God has just done the thing only God can do. The room is still full of the impossibility of it. The mother is still trembling. The father is still standing outside himself. The three fishermen at the door are not breathing. And the first thing the rabbi thinks of in that exact moment is that the child is 12, that she has been sick for a long time, that she has not eaten in who knows how long, and that her small body is going to be hungry. Not, let us pray. Not, let us mark this moment. Not, kneel before me and understand who I am. Get her some bread. Get her some figs. Whatever is in the kitchen. She needs to eat. There is no one in human history who could have invented this detail. It is too small. It is too tender. It is the kind of thing that only happens because it actually happened, and only gets remembered because someone in that room could not stop telling the story for the rest of their life, and always included this part. The God who made the stars looked at a hungry 12-year-old and asked her parents to feed her. And somewhere in the kitchen, with hands that were probably shaking, the mother went to find a piece of bread. The father, maybe, just stood there in the doorway, looking at his daughter as she sat down on the edge of the bed. The same daughter he had run out on at dawn. The same daughter the servants had walked toward him about not an hour ago. Now sitting up. Now looking at him. Now hungry. Holding out her hand for the bread. He had spent everything on the road this morning. His title, his standing, his pride, the certainty of his colleagues, the respect of his servants, the good opinion of the women in his own courtyard. He had paid all of it. And in the end, what he had bought with all that spending was the simplest thing in the world, a meal with his daughter. The smallest, most ordinary, most holy thing a family ever does together. Bread on a small wooden table. A girl chewing slowly. A mother who cannot stop looking at her. A father who has nothing left to say. And a carpenter standing quietly in the doorway, watching them eat, before he turns to go. Now go back to the road. Walk all the way back to the place where Jesus stopped. The press of bodies, the fingertip on the thread, the questioning look on his face. The father standing half a step ahead with the door of his own street in view, and every second of his daughter's life leaking out of the world. Look at that pause now. Look at it through everything you have just seen. Because it was never what it looked like from inside. From inside, it looked like abandonment. From inside, it looked like a man who had his priorities wrong. From inside, it looked like the worst possible timing, a stranger's emergency stepping in front of a father's emergency at the exact second a father's emergency could not afford it. And the news that arrived in that pause seemed to confirm what the pause had already been whispering. He was too late. The teacher should not be troubled any further. "Walk home, sir. It is over." But it was not over, and he was not too late. The pause was not abandonment. The pause was where he was preparing to do the larger thing. While Jairus stood in the road and watched a woman receive her healing, his own daughter was crossing the line he had been afraid of all morning. And Jesus knew. He knew when he stopped. He knew when he spoke to her. He knew when he called her daughter. He knew the whole time. He was not racing the clock. He had no clock to race. He stopped because he could afford to stop, and because the woman who had been invisible for 12 years could not afford one more day of being invisible, and because there was room in his morning for both of them, even if there was no room in Jairus's. He was not late. He was never going to be late. The road that seemed to stop was the road that brought Jairus, slowly, gently, all the way to the only room where what he actually needed could be given. Not a bedside rescue, a resurrection, a daughter brought back, a meal on a small wooden table, a life that would now keep going. Sit with that for a long, quiet moment. Sit with the road. Sit with the 4 words spoken into the worst news. Sit with the small hand in the carpenter's hand. Sit with the bread the mother went to find. Maybe tonight you are standing on your own road. Maybe you have been calling for a long time, and somewhere along the way something else seemed to step in front of you, and you have been standing there ever since, watching attention you needed go to a body that was not yours. Maybe you have been the last one still believing in your own house, and the people you love have begun, kindly or not, to laugh at the hope you are holding on to. Maybe you have already heard the sentence that closes the door, the diagnosis, the answer, the silence that came in place of the word you were waiting for, and you cannot tell anymore whether anyone is listening at all. Hear this. The pause is not absence. The pause is not punishment. The pause is not him forgetting which one of his children is bleeding the most tonight. He stopped on that road because he had room for a woman who had been invisible for 12 years. And he still arrived in that house in time for a girl who was 12 years old. And the math he was doing in that pause is math you cannot do from where you are standing. The next time it feels like he has stopped, and it will feel like that again, remember the road. Remember the 4 small words. Remember the small hand in his hand. Remember the bread. He has not moved past your house. He is on his way. And if the door of the room looks like it is already closed, listen. He still speaks the language of fathers. He still bends down at the bed. He still says, "Talitha, little one, get up." Let us pray together. Father, thank you that you do not run on our clock. Thank you for the road, and for the woman, and for the small hand. We will be honest with you. We are tired. We have called for a long time and the silence has been heavy, and some of us have begun to wonder whether you stopped for someone else. Stand with us in our own rooms tonight. Speak the small word over the place inside us we thought had died. Help us not to be afraid. Help us to keep believing. Talitha, get up. Amen. I would love to know which moment stayed with you tonight. The fall in the dust at the lake, the pause on the road when Jesus stopped for the woman, the 4 small words spoken into the worst news, the carpenter's hand on the small, cool hand of a 12-year-old,
the bread on the table at the end. Tell me in the comments. I sit with every message that comes in here, and the ones you write make this work feel like a real conversation. And if you stay close, next time we will go to the night Jesus prayed so hard the sweat on his face fell to the ground like drops of blood. The garden, the cup, the three friends who could not stay awake, and the moment a man chose love over fear with no one watching but his Father.